You're listening to Welcome to Eloma, a podcast for highly ambitious dreamers who get shit done. I'm your host, Kiley Peters. This is a space where we talk about building communities. So as many of you know, we launched the 100 Collective at the beginning of 2023. And let me just say that I have big goals for the 100 Collective and I love it and I'm super excited about it. And I was warned that building a community is tough, but boy, it really is. It really is. So if anybody out there is thinking about starting a community and they're like, yeah, this would be easy, no big deal, you're wrong and everyone's lying to you. So when we started doing a bit of our homework to figure out how we were going to build this community, we were introduced to today's guest towards the beginning of 2023, and her breadth of knowledge and expertise when it comes to community building, in my experience, is truly unsurpassed. So I'm really excited to dive into today's conversation with Deb Schell. She is a community strategist and co-founder of Community Consultants Collective. She's the host of the Community Strategy podcast, and she's also a freshly minted author of Creator to Community Builder, the book. So she knows a thing or two about building communities. She's absolutely brilliant at what she does, and I cannot wait to dive into today's conversation with her. Welcome to Eloma, Deb.
Wow, what an introduction. That was amazing. Thank you so much. I'm excited to chat with you about community. And you are right. It is not easy.
It's not easy. It's not easy. So, Deb, you do this a lot and you've helped a lot of other people do this. What led you to the world of building communities? And we're just going to stop there because otherwise I'm going to unleash a million questions. So what led you to doing this work? Let's start there.
I was a member of an online community in 2017, 2018, and it helped change my life. I was working in a sales role. And previous to that, I had been doing journalism and photography. That's what I went to school for. And I'd been struggling to make it as a creative in my 20s and 30s. And was trying to figure out to do something other than sales because I just wasn't excited about selling stuff. And one of the things I wanted to do was become a travel writer. This online community I joined called Location Indie. I found it because I didn't have anybody in my physical community here in central Pennsylvania that could really guide me in how do you start an online business back in 2016, 2017. So I found this online community. I joined them. I had a lot of instructive courses and learned so much from them. I ended up meeting them in Denver in 2018 and then flew to Mexico and met them again in 2019 and had such an amazing experience. And they helped me figure out a way to quit my corporate job. And I did that in the December of 2019 to become a travel writer right before a pandemic.
I was building a thing.
Portfolio travel writing based on in a niche that I had helped. They had this community of peers had helped me develop a niche in finding destinations of calm. And that's why my business is called Find Calm Here, because initially it was a travel company blogging and talking about destinations of calm. And when that whole pandemic thing started, I had been pitching publications and quickly realized that this isn't going to be something that I can do this year because people are not traveling in 2020.
Yeah, seriously.
And at the same time, I was running an in-person workshop with just a few friends just to try to test things out to help people find calm in daily life. And so when I decided, I met a couple people who helped me kind of transform what I was doing in person virtually. And so that everybody could practice safely during the pandemic. And I just started launching these online events. I recruited a lot of speakers. And in 2020, I ended up opening my own community on the same platform that I had been a member of for 2.5 years, which was Mighty Networks. And immediately got sideswiped with all kinds of messaging of oh, it's easy to launch a community and you can it'll run itself and all these things. And I'm cool. And I followed all the I had a checklist and did everything right the way I thought it was right. And here, 0 members on my paid launch weekend in June of 2020. And that kind of sucked. So what was funny about this was that at the same time, I had taken the community design masterclass through Mighty Networks, and they had a couple people in that cohort wanted to keep connecting after the 5 weeks. I offered a space within my community and said, hey, well, why don't we just meet up here? And over 6 months, every week, community builders and I gathered to talk about our community, which later became the Mighty Mastermind. But that's kind of how I got into community building for myself. And then when I started to realize that fellow community builders wanted my help with not just the platform, but also just the logistics and figuring out, making all those decisions about when I should launch, how I should launch. And they started to ask me, Deb, can you help me? I became a consultant. And then since then, I've helped over 60 entrepreneurs or business owners in launching an online community or course or program.
So just a couple. Done this a few times.
Just a couple pivots along the way.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the name of the game. If there's one thing I've learned in the, you could argue decades that I've been in entrepreneurship, it's the only thing that you can guarantee is change.
Yeah.
Like everybody who thinks like, oh, I'll just put this business plan in place and it'll just work forever. No, it won't. It just won't. So like, just don't even.
You're lucky if it lasts for 30 days.
Yeah. It's like every 90 days, it's like, yep, that'll change and this'll change and all those things. Okay. But that being said, like you said, like everybody is talking about building communities. It's a very hot topic. Everybody has these grand illusions of like, oh, I'll build this thing and then I'll retire and I'll do the Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week and it'll be great. Yeah. Not quite how it really shakes out though. So what are some of the mistakes you have seen people make and what would you recommend that they do instead of those things?
Well, I would say, a lot of people have that philosophy that it's a passive income generator, and community is anything but passive. If you invite people into your home and then you don't tell them what to do, you could have an imagination of what might happen. Mm-hmm. Like they might terrorize your house. They might just walk out and leave. Many things could happen. So just like the same goes for online spaces, right? We have to be intentional about what we're building, who we're inviting into this space, and specifically creating psychological safety, because social media doesn't provide us with that. And that's what happens is people will not share. If our goal is to connect with others and to share each other's content and wisdom and shared knowledge, they're not going to do that on a Facebook page or a group unless they feel very connected to other members, because they know, okay, something I put out there isn't going to be automatically rejected, or, they're not going to have some kind of a conflict right away because they're in a supportive space. So that's the one mistake I see people make, is just trying to launch too fast without knowing who's in the room, and also just making a lot of assumptions of what they're going to do, where they're going to go, and how they're going to participate, without thinking about the fact that they have these individuals, each person they invite in here to this space has their own life with challenges and a career or kids or whatever. So they've got their own things happening. And so they're not, they might be excited to be in your community, but also they have a lot of things going on themselves. And so I think a lot of creators and community builders kind of don't think about that in the process.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because that was something as we built out or started designing the 100 Collective, that was something I was super aware of, because I also am involved in a lot of things. And I found myself that anything that was asking for too much of my time, I was like, yeah, I don't want anything to do with that. That's too much. And so we started with like a very, minimalist, if you will, approach to community building for like a pretty nominal fee. And now what we're hearing from people is, well, we want this and we want more in person and we want this and this and this and this. And we're like, it's a balance between trying to figure out what do I actually want to offer and how much can I physically do? And giving the people what they want. Right?
Yeah. There's a balance between so most entrepreneurs, I would assume, that are building an online community already have some kind of existing business. But if a lot of people I've talked to in the last couple of years don't, they're just launching a community that is the product, that is what they're selling, whatnot. They don't have any other things. Maybe they're thinking about building a course, or maybe they want to do a mastermind, but they're trying to figure all of that out. And what happens is they've been told that I don't need to have a big audience. Well, if you don't have a big audience, then you have to think about how many people actually convert. Just because you have 10,000 followers on social media, that doesn't convert to 500 people in your, community paid platform. It certainly is nowhere near the conversion rates that you would get. And even social media, with all the algorithms now, are so hard to get eyeballs on that content, much less for you to get even more of their attention in a dedicated platform. So it really comes down to really knowing who you're serving and solving a problem in a community that only the community could solve. If I want to get my taxes done, well, my accountant does that. I don't need a community unless I'm going to become a tax preparer and I want to learn from other tax professionals. Sure. That could be a community, but me just getting my taxes done is a service that I go pay somebody for. That's a problem that I would have that would not be solved by the community, for example.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people miss that step of what problem is this community solving? How am I helping them, and what's in it for them as the member versus what's in it for me as the host? And you have to have two lanes, right? Because you can't only think about members, because you might have a revenue problem. And if you don't think about the revenue, the business, if you think about the business only, then you really don't have a good path to really serving the members in an authentic way. So it's really about that balance.
What are some ways you have found that are really helpful in terms of getting feedback from members to improve the community and improve engagement?
So this really depends on the scope of your community and the scale. I work with people who have smaller cohorts, and they usually are either offering large, either free, or they're offering high ticket opportunities. And so there aren't that many people in the community. Let's say there's at the max 50 people. In that case, you then have the ability to go and reach out individually to them. And maybe you put a survey out to those 50 people and you ask them a series of, 5 questions about events or participation or content. And from that survey, maybe you reach out to certain people in that survey who want to give you more feedback, and have a call with them, a direct call, one-to-one call with them, talking about how, if there's an existing membership, how has their experience been? What's the onboarding process been like? Are there challenges or things that you got stuck in the process of the tech platform? And then also, is this helpful in your daily life? I think the biggest measure of success in a community is, are your members actually utilizing and implementing whatever they're learning in their daily life? If it's something they say, oh yeah, because of this community, I have, decided to no longer eat dairy because I've learned that this is not good for me. It's a health community or something. Or I've learned that, I need to be focused on LinkedIn, and I don't have to worry about all the platforms, because I know that my ideal clients are on LinkedIn, and that's what I learned in this community. So I make my focus that. So just having a guide and a reference point from those members that they are finding value, because if they aren't finding value, then you're not going to have a community. Yeah, they're not going to stay for very long. So it's got to be something that they can benefit, but also something that's going to make sense for you as a host.
You said communities of 50 or so. What would you say, and maybe the answer is it depends, but what would you say is an average community size?
There are so many different kinds of communities. So yes, it kind of depends, but I would say I primarily work with communities of practice. So what that means to me is communities that are transformational. They get you from one place to another, whether it's like, I want to lose weight, I want to find a job, I want to build a business. They're doing something that they don't want to do on their own. It's a lot easier to go to the gym when you have a friend that you know is going to meet you there. It's a lot easier to get to a meeting for networking if you know a few people in the room and you're not going into a room where you don't know anybody. So thinking about those things virtually is the same thing. We want to think about how we're connecting those members and they can build relationships with each other.
And I had a follow-up question that I forgot to ask. When you were talking about like essentially surveying and then reaching back out to people for follow-ups, how often do you recommend community hosts do that? Is this like an annual thing, a quarterly thing? What would be your recommendation?
So I would say a lot of people I work with, they are doing either memberships or they're doing courses. So if you're doing a course, you would evaluate after the course. I would recommend like not booking courses back to back. Like if you have a 4-week course, don't do another 4-week course right after the next one, because you want to give space in there. Get feedback from those course participants before you launch another cohort so that you can do that in a way that you're taking the benefit from those past participants and into the next course. And then for ongoing memberships, I mean, I would say every 6 months or so, you would probably want to do a check-in, depending on, again, it depends on the structure of your community. If you are already like knowing your members and they're very active, you might not need to check in but once a year, because you kind of get a grasp of that. But you always have new members. So that's another thing you want to think about, is what you're hopefully you always have new members. So you're having new members hopefully come in, and you're also going to have some people leaving, because communities are a phase of life, right? So there's different communities that I'm in for certain periods of time.
Yeah, they're fluid.
And you come in and maybe I'm really participating in one for a specific thing. And then I get through that thing. Like I needed to build my business and now I'm on to building my business. And so I've built it and now I've got to go test it out. So maybe I don't need that community all the time. Maybe I do. It just depends on individuals. But I think that's right. There's something called the commitment curve that they write about, where people get really interested. There's a tick up in the commitment curve and then it'll dip. And then it'll come back up and then it'll dip again, because people have a life and sometimes life gets in the way of participating, even if they want to.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. Okay, so you may have already touched on this, but I just want to make sure I ask the blunt question. Yeah. What is the greatest key to successfully building a community? And then I will also toss in and monetizing a community, because I think it's important to acknowledge that they're not necessarily the same things.
No, I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about monetizing a community. I think that's a newer concept. I think that primarily we've thought about community. I mean, think about from, from when you're growing up. I mean, everybody has been in a community of some sort, whether it's an in-person community or a virtual community. And I think when we're talking about these kinds of challenges, we are in a new time period where people are their attention is split into so many places. And so it's really hard to A, get their attention, and then B, keep it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that the things that are challenging for entrepreneurs when they are just opening a program, if it's a free program, I think some of the best successful things I've seen is that they offer a lot of resources, but not just content, connection. Because I think that the more connection that you're providing, whether that's in the form of, hybrid events where you have some virtual and you have some in person, or you have chapters, or you have some way for your members to connect with each other, that's primarily why people want to be in a community. They want to be in a community because they want to connect with others that they don't already know, so that they can learn and meet new people. So I think that that's the most important point, that a lot of people, when you go to paid communities, they focus so much on content And the challenge with that, they think, oh, I have to make it really valuable. And that means I have to have a lot of content. And what I tell people is actually no, because what happens is people will walk in the door virtually to your space and might be, if you have a whole lot of stuff on that left side navigation, or when they come in the door, there's a lot of descriptions or things that they have to look at, they're going to get overwhelmed and they're not going to want to stay. And they don't even know anybody there. If they don't know anybody, if they have no idea who anybody is in the room, they're certainly not going to share or post anything. Even if you say share or post, they're still not going to.
So how do you get around that? What's the best way to make somebody who's just joined feel super welcome and then give them the tools they need to engage?
So typically what I would recommend doing is a combination of a couple things. So making sure you connect with them individually, but then when they join the group, connect them with somebody else, like have a buddy system or a pairing program. So maybe you say, oh, hey, Deb, you and Sharon, you both are blah, you're both in Pennsylvania, or you're both doing marketing or something to that effect, like something about two people, and maybe pairing them together, virtually, just by tagging them within the community, because you know something about them, or, sending a message to one or the other and saying, hey, I really feel like you should reach out to so-and-so because they would be a good connect if you know that person is much going to react better to a direct message than like a post within a forum. The other opportunity is on a video call like Zoom. We have the capability with Zoom to have breakout rooms. And one of the things that I really recommend, especially like if you have a monthly membership, doing some kind of a monthly connect where members just connect with each other. So it's a dedicated time to connect, and doing breakout rooms where I give them a prompt question. What's your biggest challenge for the week, or what's something that you're excited to tell people about today? And then you break out a room and into pairs, or sometimes groups. If it's a big group, if you have like 60 or 80 or 100 people on a call, you probably have to do like groups of 5 or something like that, or groups of 10 or whatever. But giving them enough time so that they can at least have 3 to 5 minutes to talk to each other. And they get a lot done in that 3 to 5 minutes. They talk a lot in that 3 to 5 minutes, and you can build a relationship with somebody in just a 3-minute 3-minute time. That connection will last months after that 3 minutes in a lot of experiences that I've seen, because you can build a really great relationship by connecting with somebody, by seeing their face and talking with them, and not in front of a group of people. So a lot of people are like timid or shy to be like, oh, let me tell everybody about me. And, I don't even know who's here. I don't know anybody I don't know about you. It's a lot easier to do those kinds of things and to say, oh yeah, I like hiking and I'm going to go camping this weekend, if you're in a one-to-one call with somebody. So those are ways that I feel like I call them mixers sometimes, that I'll do like networking mixers or some kind of, fun, cool phrase that you can tell your members something to just get them excited about meeting each other, and then helping them connect with different people each time. If that's possible, if you have enough of members that show up, that you can connect them. But those are some ways that I really recommend connecting members intentionally. And then like on the other side, you could do social events. I've had social happy hours. I've had virtual open mic nights where we just had our members come and play and sing songs and do stuff like that, or like a karaoke night where, you get to meet people in a whole different, especially if you're in a business community, you get to see a whole nother side of people when you do certain activities. Like a murder mystery night was really fun. I had a virtual murder mystery night that was really neat in a community. So there's just a lot of different activities, if you think outside the box, to get people kind of like out of that like 30-second, pitch thing, and like, let's talk about like who you really are and what you're excited about, what lights you up. So yeah.
That's such a good reminder, because, as an entrepreneur who surrounds myself with a lot of other entrepreneurs, we always say nobody understands entrepreneurship unless they're also an entrepreneur. And so we tend to walk around in clans, right? And it's like, yeah, but then we also tend to have the same conversations in silos about our business because we're all addicted to our business and we can't stop thinking about our business, even though we've all read 15 mindset books on how that's not healthy and we're really trying and we have all these practices and we're still failing at it. And so it's a good reminder that we're all human and like sometimes we could build a greater relationship with somebody over sharing like an apple pie recipe that's from like your great grandma and you've been making it for 20 years and like that lights them up. Like I just learned this past weekend I was at a networking thing, a community thing, and I found out that squash are fruits and not vegetables. And I was like, I have a lot of questions now because I was pretty sure that they were vegetables and now I have to look into a lot of things. But it just opened up this whole conversation. I was with a bunch of women entrepreneurs, but we got into a very deep conversation about squash, and I was like, I need to make some notes. I have a lot of things to look into now.
That's awesome. I don't think I realized that either. So,
they said it was because of the seeds, but I need to look into this. Don't take my word on that, but you might want to research too. Okay. So we talked about building a community. I love this just obvious reminder of like, hey, everyone's a human. Like that's what we all really want is human connection, right?
Yeah. So, I'm not doing any shiny marketing tactics of like, hey, go here, do this, press that. No, I'm like, here, this is simple. Let's cut out the BS and say,
this is the thing.
Here's the real deal. We just got to talk to each other. Like when I was talking to one of the clients, I was like, well, how do I know who my ideal members are? And I said, you talk to people. They were like, there's not like 17 steps of like a tech thing that I need to set up. I'm like, no, you just talk to them.
I mean, and you have to talk to them without an agenda.
Yeah.
Sure.
And listening, like talking in the matter of, I want to talk with you so that I can understand and know you.
Yeah.
So if you approach it by, I want to get to know you as a person and build a relationship with you, that's a different set of requests than going to somebody and saying, hey, I want to tell you about my business idea and pitch to you for 20 minutes. Like that's going to be a whole different thing.
Yeah. The phrase listening to understand versus, what is it? Listening to understand versus listening to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
That might
be right. Is it be right?
Be right? Maybe.
I don't know.
I screwed it up. Anyway, the first part is definitely listening to understand. And the second part is something less noble. So yeah, no, absolutely. And it's a good reminder. So for anybody who's a real introvert and doesn't like talking to people, maybe community building's just not your thing.
Oh yeah. And you know what? Not that it's not their thing, but I know a lot of introverts that are community builders and community managers.
Yeah.
And they find their own unique ways to connect with people in ways that aren't, they don't have to go stream live to 10,000 people. They can, interact in different ways that make sense to them in smaller cohorts. And so, that's why I think it depends on your personality, but also it depends on, they say about like you only need 1,000 true fans or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And even less than that in a community, if you have a solid group of community builders that or community members that want to stick with you, they might stick with you for like 5 years. Mm-hmm. And they're going to love it. And they're going to, everything that you send out, they're going to buy it. They're going to, promote it. Cause that's what happened with me when I was in the location indie community. I mean, they didn't pay me to write about them in my book, but that's what ended up happening is that I'm inviting people and I'm blogging about it. I'm blogging all my trips and all this stuff. For years, I've been sharing about that group and they didn't ask me to do any of that stuff. It was just something that I was so passionate because it changed my life. I was like, people have to know about this. It's like a secret. People have to know. I don't want to keep it secret anymore.
Yeah. You mentioned like tenure in a membership. And again, I'm sure the answer is probably it depends. But based off of your experience in managing communities, what would you say the average time somebody spends in a community? What do you think that is?
That's a good question. I think Yeah, it really varies. Like if you have a course or some like heavy content, they would be required to spend more time on the platform, that you might see a higher hours. But like, if you're just creating normal events and engagement, I mean, I don't see anybody spending like an hour a day. It's probably more like an hour a week,
Or
like if they're checking
length of membership, like a year, 3 years, 5 years.
If they're staying in for longer than 3 years, is what you're saying?
Or just whatever it looks like. Assuming it's just membership, like content aside.
Yeah. Membership, I mean, the amount of time that they're spending lengthwise, like how many years they'd stay in the community, is that the question?
Yeah.
I think, that's tough because it really depends on what problems the community is solving. But again, I was in that location Indie community for 3.5 years. I know other communities that I've been in or that other people have been in for 10 years. Yeah. Thinking about like meetup groups, like there's meetup groups that meet for decades, So
it just depends.
Weekly. Yeah. So it really depends on people's commitment levels. The leaders change hands. There's a group that I'm in called the Polka Dot Powerhouse, and they have a Lancaster chapter in Pennsylvania. And that leader she has been there for almost 5 years, I guess, been leading that group. And she's passing it on to another person who's now taking over in the next couple months. But they've had dramatic growth in their community up to like 160 members, I think, over the last few years. It's really grown. So I think, and their members keep coming back and staying because they really are committed to making sure people are seen and heard and valued and getting feedback from them and talking with them to make sure that they're getting what they need in the space.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah. Okay. So you also, we mentioned in your intro, you also just launched a book. Mm-hmm. Tell all of the listeners out there what they can expect in your new book.
So Creator to Community Builder, Find Calm While Building an Online Community is kind of like a memoir / workbook. It was initially going to be a workbook and it ended up being a little bit more than that when I ended up writing it. But basically, I wrote it in 2 months in the beginning of the year of 2023. And it's really all of the experiences that I've learned. I interviewed over 100 community builders on my podcast, the Community Strategy Podcast. And so within the book, there's a couple QR codes that link to podcast episodes, and I have excerpts from some podcasts. There's also some checklists and worksheets and links to a workbook that I will be promoting here in the next couple of weeks. For people, there's a companion workbook that's going to be coming out that hasn't come out yet, but basically just giving everybody a step-by-step guide so that if you're sitting alone thinking about, I want to do an online community and there's so much content and lots of videos, but I still don't know what to do. Like, that's what I usually get with clients when they call me. They're like, I've watched all the videos. I kind of have a feeling of like, I think I know what I'm doing, but then I'm like, is this right? Like, is this how it's supposed to be? And a lot of people just want validation. So this book was really something that I wrote for the clients that I worked with, examples from clients of here's what they've done, here's how it works. There's not a one way. Community is like unlimited potential, right? You could do so many different things within a community, within an online community. So I think it's just a really good guidebook for anyone who wants to consider launching it. And it might be something where you think, well, I'll read it to see if I want to do a community, and that'll help you decide if you even want to launch a community once you see the amount of work that goes into leading one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited to check it out. Congratulations. I know that can oftentimes be a huge labor of love. So that's awesome. I'm excited that that's out there. Deb, so we're talking about community. I got a doozy of a question for you. What impact do you want to make on the world, and or what legacy do you want to leave?
That's a bold question. I think I wrote in the book, in the beginning of the book, that I really believe that communities are what is going to change the world. It's clear that through the pandemic, we've experienced a lot of deaths and just sadness and grief and loss. And there's been a lot of hard things that we've been going through. And there's also, this is a time of awakening for a lot of people who are kind of, realizing things. They're just waking up to certain things in life as a human and questioning things. And it's an exciting time, but communities help people implement things that we learn because we want to do things together. We are humans. And humans like to be together and doing things. It's part of the basics of belonging. Is when you want to feel like you belong when you're a teenager. That's all we want, right? Is to feel like, oh, somebody accepts us and we belong to something. That doesn't end in high school. It continues throughout our life. We always feel like we want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And so I feel like that's the same for me. I think that's why I'm so passionate about community, because I didn't know up until 2020 that I was a community builder my whole life. I'd been bringing people together in my house when I used to have open houses and all that kind of stuff. So I think it just kind of developed into, oh, this is actually what I'm supposed to be doing. So no wonder all these other things that I tried in my life didn't work out, because this is supposed to be where I'm supposed to be. So I think that impact that you're talking about is helping other people to connect with others authentically and intentionally so that we can feel more sense of belonging and acceptance, because our world has been one of lack and exclusions and not including people and keeping people, not available in a lot of scenarios, right? Not accessible to things. So I think that's while the world's changing, it's also that's the time for us to, as community builders, to open up the gates and to be able to connect with others. The Community Consultant Collective is a group that I co-founded with some colleagues, and that group has a bigger mission that I'm a part of that is really about helping community builders launch and lead, larger communities across the globe. And we have a global advisory board that we have some big missions with that. But cool. I'll just say that I think just connection and helping, people feel like they belong, because I know that was something I never felt I belonged, in my youth and a lot of times in life. So,
yeah, it's easy to feel alone in a lot of situations. I love that, this sense of connectivity and community and connectedness. I think that's awesome. Now, you've been running your business for a while, and you've also seen other people running their business. So my last question for you, Deb, is what is your greatest insight or discovery about life and entrepreneurship?
Trust that things will work out. Trusting myself. It's hard when things are not going the way that you want them to go. And stay on the path of, okay, I know this is where I want to go. I don't want to go back to that 9-to-5 job. I've got to stick with this, because entrepreneurship will test you. It tested me many, 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 many times. I have had 3 businesses besides the one I have now. I had a photography business for 10 years. I never made it to make that full time. I had a cleaning business. I never got that to be full time. This is the first business that I've done that has been a full time endeavor. And lots of times I've wanted to give up on it. And it's frustrating. It's hard to do this thing on your own. And I feel like I didn't realize there are resources out there to make it easier now. But a lot of times we don't really look for those, and we're creating the wheel, or making up our own things all the time. So I made a lot of my own documentation and all of those things, but just the resilience that I've had. And what's really funny for me in particularly is knowing my strengths, because when I found out about UMAP, which is an assessment program that aligns with Clifton's strengths, those programs help you figure out your strengths, your values, your preferred skills, and your burnout skills. And knowing those and then putting those into perspective of my life, I've realized that I have top strengths of communication, winning others over, positivity, futuristic, and restorative are in my top 5 of my strengths. I am literally a community builder who helps people find calm. And that's literally in my top 5 strengths.
That's amazing.
It's crazy when you match those things up. But I think that has been the biggest insight for me is that, not that a report's going to tell you everything, but just having a little bit more validation for myself to say, Deb, you're on the right path. You just have to stick with it. And sometimes it's going to be really hard. And you might have to take 3 steps back to go 5 steps forward, because sometimes that's just the way life works. So I always say, it's never over, right? It's never going to be over. Like, I'm still going to be doing something. It might transmute into something else. But yeah, I think the resilience is by far just having the stick-to-itiveness to do it, because a lot of people don't. A lot of people are in a 9-to-5 job because they're too afraid to try something, or they don't have any idea of what they would try because they just haven't thought about it. So any person who's trying a new thing that's not, a job that's on their own is going to have challenges. But the part of it that isn't necessarily fun, but it's helpful, is to be open to the process.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the big mantras I've been really holding on to is trust the process. Just trust that you're doing the right thing. I mean, that doesn't mean follow blindly, right? But we got to let go of the things that we don't have control over and just focus on the things that we do.
Everything doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have a website and all your social media platforms, and you don't have to have all the things. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people, as entrepreneurs, we have this assumption that we can't launch a business until we have all these things that we checked off a box. And at the end of the day, I ask my clients, well, do you want money in your inbox, or do you want to spend a lot of time creating content? And they're like, I want money in my inbox. And so then I'm like, well, then we have to design something that gets to that faster instead of creating barriers. And a lot of times we don't know that we're creating barriers, but we end up creating barriers for ourselves before. And ultimately saying, oh, I can't do my business until I get my website, and I have to pay a website designer to do that. And, 6 months later, oh, I still didn't get a website designer. 6 months ago, you could have launched a business by just saying, hey, I'm starting to offer this thing to 5 people, tell people about it, get a few clients in the door without a website, just have an email address and a link for people to book a call with you or something maybe. And that's it. And you can launch a business just as simply as that.
Yep. Now, keeping a business and growing a business, and, there's a few more steps in there.
Different things.
Yes, you can get started. Yeah. Well, Deb, thank you so much for your time. For anybody listening who wants to learn more and get in touch, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
findscalmhere.com. Also on LinkedIn is my primary social media channel. So I'm on LinkedIn at Deb Schell.
Awesome. And for anybody listening, if you've enjoyed this episode as much as I have, please go ahead and leave a review wherever you are listening. And please don't forget to sign up for our Rain 9 email newsletter at rixnewsletter.com. You will make sure that you don't miss any of our podcast episodes and all of our tips and tricks. Deb, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Glad to be here. Hopefully everybody got some value out of that, and take care.
To continue learning how to better build your business and make your vision a reality, subscribe to the Welcome to Eloma email list at welcometoeloma.com.